There's this phrase that people use. They say, never try to bullshit a bullshitter. And that expression is usually used by people who are trying to say, I'm a bullshitter and don't try to bullshit me because I recognize the methods of bullshitting because I'm an expert bullshitter myself. That's supposed to be the message. So the fact is that the sort of people who are going to tend to say, don't try to bullshit a bullshitter, are usually people who are trying to claim that they themselves are bullshitters and that they're proud of it. And it is odd to me that it is a common expression that people are familiar with. Don't try to bullshit a bullshitter, or never try to bullshit a bullshitter. Isn't it interesting when there's so many statements that could be made about bullshit, that this is the one that we're most familiar with? You don't hear people saying things like, I mean, what would be more sensible if you're going to make statements and cliche expressions about bullshit and bullshitters? I can think of a lot of others that would be a lot more relevant and pertinent. For instance, why don't people say, never try to argue with a bullshitter? That would really make sense. And this is what happens too often. This is what we spend too much of our lives actually engaged in doing, trying to argue with bullshitters. There is no end to the amount of you're never going to win. There's no end to their methods of replying with bullshit replies. They can always find no matter how outrageous, some manner of responding to your claims, however factual and accurate, with more fucking bullshit. Why? Because that's what they're all about. They're bullshitters. So why don't we say, why isn't it a common expression, never try to argue with a bullshitter? But we don't say that. We say, never try to bullshit a bullshitter. And again, implied in that statement, never try to bullshit a bullshitter, is usually the person saying it is saying, look, don't try to bullshit me because I, myself, am an expert bullshitter and probably better at flinging bullshit than you are. So don't try to bullshit me because I recognize your tactics and I can outdo you when it comes to bullshitting. But that's the sort of person that, suppose you don't, in fact, very often that comment is made by somebody who is a bullshitter to somebody who isn't. Very often, if you're a genuine person trying to have a genuine discussion with someone who's a fucking bullshitter, they'll come back with this bullshit remark saying, oh, don't try to bullshit a bullshitter. It's the same. Bullshit is just a vernacular term for lying, essentially. Lying and swindling, trying to fool people. And so when somebody says don't try to bullshit a bullshitter, what they're really saying is don't try to lie to a liar. And if you're a person who is not a liar, an honest, genuine person, and you end up engaged in this ridiculous argument with a liar, what happens? What happens almost all the time in that situation? The liar will accuse the honest person of lying. That's right. The bullshitter accuses the non-bullshitter, the genuine person, of bullshitting. Because that's what bullshitters are doing. It's bullshit to do that. And that's what they're all about. It's bullshit for a liar to accuse an honest person of lying. And that's what being a liar is all about. It's bullshit. Bullshit is all about lying. Lying is all about bullshit. And our society is drowning under bullshit because it is a society based on lies. It doesn't get much more obvious than that. And it's the classic situation of what happens when you have a truth teller engaged in an argument with a liar. And what if they seem identical? How do you tell one from the other? So, back to the discussion of the phrase. It seems to me if we were a sensible society, we would have other types of phrases than "don't try to bullshit a bullshitter." We would say "don't try to argue with a bullshitter," "don't try to negotiate with a bullshitter," "don't try to have anything to do with a bullshitter if you can help it," "do not try to live with a bullshitter," "do not try to marry a bullshitter or have any kind of relationship with a bullshitter," and by no means should you ever, ever, ever fucking vote for a bullshitter. Why don't we have that as one of the most common expressions in our society for people to be going around saying, don't ever vote. Never vote for a bullshitter. That should be our common expression in our society. But when's the last time you heard somebody say that? Well, 5 seconds ago you heard me say it. But when's the last time before me that you've heard anybody say, never vote for a bullshitter? No, what you hear people say is, you have to choose the lesser of two evils. That's what people say. We have a lot of bullshit expressions in our society. That's one of them. Vote for the lesser of two evils. We say never bullshit a bullshitter. And then we have sort of misquoted or partially quoted quotes that get corrupted by being distorted through either being misquoted or having certain words omitted from them. And here's a couple examples of those. How often have you heard people say, money is the root of all evil? Lots of times. And you probably said it yourself because you've heard other people say it and you've accepted that as a full quote, and so it gets passed around like a dirty penny. But of course that's only a partial quote of the actual original statement that was made in the New Testament. That's right, it comes out of that phrase comes out of the Bible. Money is the root of all evil, but that wasn't the actual sentence. That was just the last half of the sentence. The actual sentence was, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I'm sure it can be translated slightly differently. There are different versions of the Bible. But essentially it comes down to the love of money, or the pursuit of money, or the lust for money is the root of all evil. Not money. Money itself is not the root of all evil. Money is just an object, just a tool. And saying money is the root of all evil, it's like saying credit cards are the root of all debt. Well, that's not accurate. The actual accurate state would be something like the reckless use of credit cards is the root of all debt. You see, that would be one statement, but then to partially quote that statement and leave out the beginning of it and just say credit cards are the root of all debt, that's misleading. It's not accurate. And the statement money is the root of all evil is also a stupid, half-quoted distortion of a genuine notion and turned it into something it was never intended to mean. Then there's, let's see. Oh, there was a statement, I think by Lord Acton, said power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. Now here, maybe it's not such a question of misquoting. Maybe it's a question of misapplication. Or maybe it's a question of something that wasn't really thought through very much. Somebody made a statement, and other people hear it, and they start just repeating it as if it's an established fact. So people say power corrupts absolutely, absolute corrupts absolutely, or power corrupts, and I have a disagreement with the basic concept to say power. Now, Lord Acton said power tends to corrupt, and I can agree with that. But to say that power automatically corrupts, I think is a something people haven't really thought through. People see corruption in power, and so they draw the conclusion that power creates corruption. Whereas I think the reality is slightly the reverse situation of the same thing. I believe that corruption is attracted to power. So the power doesn't necessarily corrupt, just as credit card doesn't necessarily create debt. But credit cards do attract people who will abuse debt and then create problems by their use of credit cards. And in a similar analogy, I think that power doesn't necessarily corrupt itself any more than credit cards necessarily cause excessive debt, but that the people who are attracted to power, in the same way that the people who are attracted to credit cards are going to tend to be the people who are eager to abuse or likely to abuse those tools. Credit cards are a tool. Power is a tool. But those people who are those people whose personality is tended toward corruption are going to gravitate toward power as something that they find irresistible, and it's because of that I believe you see so much corruption in power, and we shouldn't draw the wrong inferences of which thing is the cause and which thing is the symptom. People, with this power corrupts phrase, people have made up in their mind the notion that power is the cause and corruption is the symptom. And I think it's the reverse situation. I think the corruption is the cause. Corruption is what caused somebody being corrupt. In other words, okay, so we have the idea, people pass around this idea that people get involved with power and then it makes them corrupt, so that the power itself is the cause and the symptom is power making people corrupt. And I think it's the reverse. I think people being corrupt is the cause, and their corruption is what draws them toward power. And so corrupt people being in power is the symptom, and the cause is the corruption, rather than the cause being the power and the symptom being people in power being corrupt. Okay, so let's see, and there's one more phrase that kind of gets a little bit on my nerves. When people say extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. That's what they say. And that makes kind of sense. But I forget exactly why it annoys me, but it does, and I'm sure I have a good reason, but I'm not going to try to drag it out of my mind at this moment. But it does annoy me. So, speaking of annoyance and speaking of bullshit, here's the problem. Everybody thinks that they are the ones who are not bullshitting, presumably. Everyone wants to claim that everybody else is the bullshitter and that they are the purveyor of truth. But if you notice that there's a lot, that this society is really drowning. It's really buried under so much bullshit. That bullshit is the predominant aspect of our society, and if it weren't, I wouldn't be getting worked up or having to make an issue about it. If our society was not corrupt and was not drowning in bullshit, I wouldn't have to be probably making videos at all, for the most part. But I do have to because it is a problem. Bullshit does prevail in our society. And that being the case, as practically everybody claims that they're not the bullshitter, obviously the people who are the bullshitters are claiming they aren't. We're back again to the classic example of the truth tellers versus the liars. The truth tellers are going to say that they're telling the truth. But the liars are going to not only say the same thing, but they're going to swear to it so emphatically. They're going to swear up and down and look you straight in the eye and do everything they can to try to assure you that that lying is the last thing they would ever do. And of course it's a lie. And why does that make sense? Well, because they are liars. It all makes a twisty type of natural sense. So I look at these, for instance, political parties or political philosophies, and I see so much fucking bullshit. I look at the party that I voted for, the two times that I actually voted in a presidential election that counted. The first time I voted didn't count because it was a write-in vote, because the party didn't get on the ballot in my state. It was called the Citizens Party, and I voted for them anyhow in 1980. And I could tell that vote never did fucking thing. It was just like I could have scribbled it on the bathroom wall. It would have done more good than putting it in that machine by writing it in. But the two times that I voted for a candidate that was on the ballot for president was the Natural Law Party in 1996 and 2000. And they say some things that make sense. Some things that make a lot of sense. And then there's this turd in the punch bowl. Now, Alex Jones, well, maybe he probably didn't originate the phrase, but he's the first person I heard it from. It's not that common of a phrase at all. He was talking about, what is that guy with the lizard people? David Icke. He was talking about or to David Icke, and he said, David Icke makes a lot of sense when he talks about the people in power, the elite, the conspiracies of power, and all of this. And then he drops this turd in the punch bowl when he starts talking about shape-shifting lizard people from other planets posing as human beings, but underneath it they're shape-shifting creatures from another dimension. And he says at that point it's like dropping a turd in the punch bowl. Nobody wants to drink out of it anymore. And it's a very accurate analogy there. David Icke says a lot of stuff that makes sense, and then he drops his fucking turd in the middle of it. And I see the same thing happen as I looked up the few available, not many, but there were a few available videos on YouTube about the now defunct Natural Law Party, which has been deceased for about 8 years and actually pretty much inoperable since the 2000 election. And there are a few videos up about it. It was founded by the Maharishi, the guy that the Beatles wrote "Sexy Sadie" about. They went and stayed with him in India for a few months, and he taught them about meditation and mantras, and then at one point John Lennon got pissed at him when he supposedly attempted to rape Mia Farrow's sister, named Prudence Farrow. So there were two songs on the White Album relating to that, because the White Album was made just about the time or just after they left India and the Maharishi. So he wrote "Dear Prudence" to the alleged victim of the Maharishi's alleged attempted seduction or rape or whatever. And then Lennon wrote another song about Maharishi himself called "Sexy Sadie." Whoa, what have you done? You made a fool of everyone, Sexy Sadie. You're the latest and the greatest of them all. So he was writing in that song about how people get seduced into these guru situations where a person is presented or presents himself as the latest, greatest, special, enchanted or enlightened being, the special enlightened one who's going to shine his wisdom onto all of us if we only sit around and hanging on his every word and all that stuff. And then so then they spent a few months there, and then you discover that he's human after all. Or as they say, he has feet of clay. He's just like the rest of us, and he's just as capable of being just as capable of basically bullshitting as anybody else. And that's the point where you say, well, okay, I've reached the point. I was enchanted at first, and now I'm disillusioned, because I see that although he might have had something to teach, at the same time he's a human being too. He's not some kind of magical special being. He's a human being like all of us. So Sexy Sadie. So Sexy Sadie, let's see, about 24 years after that song, Sexy Sadie Lennon was dead, but Maharishi was still around, and he decided to start this political party called the Natural Law Party. And there's a lot of sensible remarks made by the Maharishi, or also the candidates and advocates of the Natural Law Party. John Hagelin was the candidate for president in 92, 96, and 2000. And what's more, although Lennon was dead, 2 or 3 of the surviving Beatles did come out in support of the Natural Law Party in the early 1990s. So they clearly remained some degree of civility or friendship with the Maharishi for several decades. Ooh, I hate that one. I forget what I was saying. Blech. So what was I saying about the Maharishi and the part? Oh yeah, so although his candidate was John Hagelin, who claims to be a particle physicist. You know, he says a lot of stuff that sounds sensible. He says, you know, we need to be concerned about prevention rather than punishment. And that makes a lot of sense. Instead of locking people up for committing crimes, we should be investing at least as much money and or effort into creating a society in which people are not attracted to or interested in or tempted by committing those crimes in the first place. And that makes a lot of sense. But then he gets into this turd in the punch. Then he drops this turd in the punch bowl. When he said, and he's saying we should have a world in which there isn't war, in which there's peace. And he starts dropping his turds in the punch bowl, and he says, and the way to achieve peace is through transcendental meditation and all this other nonsense. So there you go with the turds in the punch bowl. It's very similar to David Icke. I voted for the Natural Law Party because of what I had read on the few little bit of brochures that I'd seen, or the descriptions in the newspaper of the party's mission statement and all that, sounded more appealing to me than any of the other parties available. I didn't know about the Maharishi connection until a year or two ago after Maharishi died. I had never known that he had any connection with the Natural Law Party. I had never known the Beatles had anything to do with it. And I didn't really get that many specific details of interviews with John Hagelin, what he had to say, because it was back then, you know, Wikipedia didn't exist, Google didn't exist, YouTube sure as hell didn't exist, and what was available? Even just, like I said, Google didn't even exist, so to even just try to look it up, you had to use all these other search engines, which for the most part are sort of, as far as I can tell, obsolete at this point. What were the search engines I used then? Was it Yahoo? Or Ask.com or About.com? Ask Jeeves? These things. Now Google has really cornered. Google is really is at least as dominant. It's like McDonald's. You talk about fast food, you think of McDonald's. You talk about search engines, you think of Google. And that's it, really. They just own the search engine world. So back when the Natural Law Party actually was functioning, we didn't have really that availability or access to the information as readily. It wasn't as easy just to just go to Google, type in Natural Law Party, and boom, 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 there it is, right in your face, with most of the most relevant search results right on page 1, right in the top results. It wasn't quite that way back then. You didn't have videos to see of the guy talking. Now I do. Now I can see the few videos that he has on YouTube, and there's this turd in the punch bowl bullshit aspect of, sure, you sound like a nice guy, you do, you say you want peace, that's nice, and then you start talking this ridiculous, completely lame garbage about how you're going to solve world problems by people focusing mental energy in meditation and yogic flying. Yes, these transcendental meditationists who can levitate, that's such fucking goddamn fucking bullshit that you were able to sell to people 40 years ago, when I was in junior high school. There were always certain kids in junior high school who said, yeah, they used to have these transcendental meditation seminars, like on a weekend. Some would show up and people would go and they talk about levitation. And the main reason that kids my age wanted to go to this transcendental meditation seminars was they heard about levitation. They heard that these people can use mind over matter to float their bodies up into the air, to release themselves from the bonds of gravity using their minds, and this was fascinating to junior high school age teenagers. They, at that age, you're just ignorant enough to not quite, to still be able to believe in certain fairy type of fantasies without completely realizing what a ridiculous fantasy it is. And so you hear people saying with a voice of authority, like completely sincerely saying, oh yes, well, people use transcendental meditation and it's very mystical, very, very mystical, and these people completely learn how to control and concentrate so fully that they can make themselves levitate into the air. And at the age of 13 or 14, you're still a little bit gullible enough to think, well, maybe they can. Well, what do I know? I'm only 13. Somebody says that they can do this. Wow, let's find out about it. And that's the main reason that kids in junior high school, I think, wanted to go to those transcendental meditation things. Somehow, it never... Yeah, I thought that was a fascinating idea, but I somehow didn't quite believe it enough to personally check it out. But I do remember some kids would be describing, saying they went and they said, oh yeah, the guys really did levitate. Whether they were just, some of them were deliberately bullshitting. Some of them were just trying to play a prank to try to see how much they could get you to believe. And some of them maybe did believe it. And some of them believed it because other people had played the prank on them and gotten them to believe that it was sincere. But to be a grown man, to be a guy who claims to be a particle physicist and knows about quantum physics, quantum physicist, at the age of over 50 years old, and claiming that you believe that people are flying because they're concentrating their minds, that's just the turd in the punch bowl. That just turns me off and makes me think you're a fucking fool, and why the fuck did I vote for you twice, for Christ's sake? So there you go, and what we have is still an ongoing need for something better, something that is non-bullshitty when it comes to all types of third-party alternative parties and movements. There's no end to them, whether it's the Occupy Wall Street and the Anonymous, or the Tea Parties people, or this ones or that ones. They're always there. And for the most part, they're all full of, the difference between them is just the different varieties of bullshit that they're able to come up with. They're just able to come up with different variations. Different variations. So you have a new political party, for the most part, what you come up with, what you going to be able to expect from them is just new variations of the same old bullshit. And the degree to which the new party is interesting at all usually relates to the degree to which they actually give their own twist to the same old bullshits that all the rest of them are giving. Or those that are less interesting are the ones who simply don't vary very much and just end up regurgitating someone else's old bullshit pretty much intact. That's not too interesting. But if someone can take all the bullshit and give it a new twist, well then, at least it may be stupid, but at least it's interesting. So, if you can say all this stuff and then say, well, the shape-shifting lizard people from another dimension, okay, it's ridiculous, but at least it's not boring. At least it's interesting. If you go around just saying, well, the Jews are it's all the Jews' fault and they're responsible for it, that's just boring because it's already been said and done, and you're not contributing anything particularly new that way. So, I guess I'll close by mentioning how, as I was looking through videos of the Natural Law Party on YouTube, I came across a couple other, I came across 2 other alternative little splitter parties, splitters. One was the something 12-step or something, 12 principles, I don't know. And I started looking at that, and there was clearly there was this problem with bullshit in there where they were talking about this, if you vote for us, we will have our proven methods will bring unlimited prosperity to everybody in society, make everybody will become millionaires. The same old bullshit, which is hardly different from the Natural Law Party bullshit of saying, oh, we will use the proven scientific methods of transcendental meditation to bring about world peace through creating psychic vibrations in the air, blah blah blah. It's just more fucking bullshit. It's just more. And this thing with the unlimited wealth, I've heard that before. That's not really any different from somebody trying to sell you a perpetual motion machine. A machine whose movement is able to fuel its own continual movement to continually fuel more movement, fueling the movement. This perpetual motion, and it's been scientifically proven or established that the concept of perpetual motion is a scam. Now you can have things that appear to be perpetual motion, and the thing about perpetual motion is the notion that is the scam is that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, that a force of energy can do that, pull itself up by the force of energy can fuel its own self to continue fueling itself without any outside input of additional outside energy source. Sometimes there are what seems to be perpetual motion machines which are valid, or perpetual motion systems which will be valid because they are actually drawing in outside energy even if it's not visible. For instance, something that works with solar power you might be able to create a continually circulating little watermill, for instance. Well, watermills usually work because the power of the water is continually coming from the source of where the water is going from a higher level. Oh God, what's the word? Oh, not latitude, lever. I don't know, a higher. God. Well, anyhow, you know what the word is. There's a higher place to a lower place. The water is flowing from a higher place to a lower place, and that's where the energy of the watermill comes from. And the watermill keeps turning, but it's not a perpetual motion as far as the watermill causing itself to turn. The energy continues to be brought in from the effect of gravity, the momentum of the water flowing from a higher place to to a lower place. And similarly, you can have the sun shining on something, causing it to continually rotate or do something, because the sun is a continued input of an outside energy source into the system. So it's not technically a perpetual motion machine according to the definition of that being no outside input of additional energy. Anytime someone's trying to sell you a perpetual motion system of some sort, you gotta smell the bullshit. Your bullshit radar's got to start beeping. And I've seen this happens very often, these stupid little minority political parties that try to make these wild claims. So I guess I'm gonna that's what, I've been talking for 3 hours here or something, and it probably stopped recording 30 minutes ago, so let's just stop it.